Welcome back. I'm Reverend Andrew Bozeman, and this is On the Wings of Your Mind. So for the past couple of episodes, we've discussed forgiveness, and we've discussed unforgiveness, and we've discussed forgiving yourself. So there was forgiveness directed outward towards those who have hurt us, and there's forgiveness directed inward as we let ourselves off the hook. And we've explored that the effects that forgiveness and unforgiveness have on your body in terms of chronic stress and the destructive chemicals that are released when you're in a state of chronic stress brought on by unforgiveness. So today, I'd like to discuss the effect that unforgiveness has on your material success, on your making money, on your having fulfillment in your job. Unforgiveness is actually hazardous to your success. Now, admittedly, my teaching is not the standardized spiritual teaching you may have heard from others. I've heard others teach that prayer doesn't really change anything except the person who is doing the praying. Well, we all know that's not true. I've also heard that so-called miracles credited to Jesus the Christ were only stories. Perhaps so, I don't know. I doubt that they're stories based upon my own experience, but hey, if you want to believe that, fine. I've also heard that you can't really change your life and circumstances without a lot of hard work, and that isn't always effective, the hard work that is. And I've heard that what you feel and what you think doesn't really affect the outside world. It only affects you internally and those in your immediate vicinity on whom you inflict your feelings and moods, etc. So I dispute all those statements. I dispute them all because they're based upon the belief that you are a single isolated being in the midst of other single isolated beings who have no contact with each other than verbal. Maybe some interpreting body language and that kind of thing. So we know, at least those who listen to this show know, that those statements are not true, because we are individualized expressions of infinite intelligence. We are directly connected to the creative force of the universe, and we know that we are not alone in this world. We are not isolated and by ourselves. We know that. So, considering the small audience I had, which is okay, I think perhaps I'm standing on a hilltop and shouting out into the wind where very few people can hear me. But if that is the case, if that's true, then so be it. I have been given a calling from infinite intelligence, that creative force that we call God, and that calling tells me that I have a message to deliver, and so I am here delivering it, and those who are supposed to hear that message are going to hear it. Remember, many are called, but few are chosen. So I'll continue to shout from my hilltop into the wind, telling the truth about who and what we really are. You are not an isolated, powerless being, and anyone who tells you that is not telling you the truth. Now, I'm not saying that they don't believe what they're saying, because they really do, but it is still not true. So, let's get down to it. I gave a talk on Sunday at the First Spiritualist Temple of East Aurora in New York State. And in that talk, I discussed the subject of your power and your effect on the world. And so I'd like to replay that short talk for you, and then we'll just make a point of what I'm talking about, and then we'll come back after that video and continue our discussion on how unforgiveness can affect your material success. Here's the video.
To have a girl like her is truly a dream come true. Out of all the fellas in the world, she belongs to you. But it was just my imagination running away with me. It was just my imagination running away with me. Obviously, I'm not a professional. The theme of the day's talk is the imagination, and so when that was, as most of you already know, that was a hit song from the Temptations in 1971. When I realized the message that I was going to talk about imagination, that song started running through my head, so I thought I'd share it with you today. That song actually illustrates something that I find disturbing, and that is imagination is often belittled in our society. It's often referred to as just your imagination. Another term to discount the value of imagination is magical thinking. We hear that a lot in the media, magical thinking. Magical thinking, or is also known as superstitious thinking, is the belief that unrelated events are causally connected, despite the absence of any plausible causal link between them, particularly as a result of supernatural effects. Examples include the idea that our thoughts can actually affect the external world. But that's a materialistic viewpoint, and I have to admit, we are in a materialistic world, a materialistic society, where materialism has actually reached toxic levels. If you can't see it or touch it or smell it, then it isn't real. It's just your imagination. It's just magical thinking. But when you think about it, at least when I think about it, the question is referring to imagination that way actually accurate? I don't think so. Let's consider the real power of imagination. Paul Harris, a developmental psychologist and professor at the Harvard Graduate School of Education, who studies imagination, says, whenever you think about the Civil War, or the Roman Empire, or even God, you're using your imagination. The imagination is absolutely vital for contemplating reality, not just those things we take to be fantasy. Think of this, without imagination, there would be no great literature. Without imagination, there would be no great architecture. Without imagination, the cars that brought you here today would never have been invented. Without imagination, there would be no medical breakthroughs. Without imagination, there would be no scientific achievements. Einstein, for example, used his imagination when he postulated the famous theory of relativity. They asked him how he came up with that. And he said, oh, it was simple. I just imagined myself flying at the speed of light, and then I looked around to see how everything was happening around me. Imagination. Einstein said of imagination, imagination is more important than knowledge. For knowledge is limited to all we know now, and all we understand now, while imagination embraces the entire world. Imagination embraces all there ever will be to know and understand. Knowledge gives us what we already know. Imagination takes us into unknown territory. You know, for centuries, the world believed that there was no life after death. The idea of getting messages or help from deceased relatives or friends was just our imagination. They referred to the non-corporeal life form as ghosts. Yet here we are in the first spiritualist temple, celebrating the scientific truth that there is life after death. We don't call them ghosts, we call them friends and relatives. We affirm that the existence and personal identity of the individual continue after the change called death. We affirm that communication with the so-called dead is a fact, scientifically proven by the phenomena of spiritualism. I remember in the 1980s when I was matriculating at the Enron Mystery School to become a minister, one of the things we were trained to do was to access our psychic and mediumship abilities to deliver messages to people attending the church. My teacher, my spiritual teacher, Norma Tringali, asked me on numerous occasions, why aren't you giving messages? I can see the spirits around you, and they're talking to you, so why aren't you delivering messages? Well, the reason for my silence was fear. Fear of ridicule, fear of making mistakes, because I was frightened that the things I was hearing and seeing were just my imagination. It took a while for me to learn to trust and to be able to deliver messages. I also remember that we had weekly healing circle at the Church of Amron. And often people who had given up on the medical industry, the medical establishment, would contact us for help in healing those illnesses and ailments that the medical establishment said could not be healed. So we, through sending out energy, through our magical thinking, focused healing energy to those people. And despite what the medical establishment said, we were able to assist in some so-called miraculous healings. Of course, the materialists would tell us that we were just indulging in magical thinking, that what we were doing was just our imagination. Yet people were experiencing amazing healing events. Neville Goddard, who was one of the premier mystics and metaphysical teachers of the middle 20th century, taught that there's no power outside of our own consciousness. Therefore, you cannot turn to anyone outside of yourself. He felt that it was critical for us to understand that our wonderful imagination is God. He taught that imagination is God's way of showing us what's possible. And that what we call God, or source, or universe, or infinite intelligence is not outside of us. It's within us. Neville advised us to use our imaginations to guide and improve our lives. He often said that by using our imaginations to place ourselves in situations where we wished to find ourselves in the future, and then being able to see that clearly through our imagination, and being able to feel ourselves being there, then if we held on to those imagined experiences, if we held on to them, then eventually they would harden into fact. They would harden into reality. They would become concrete physical events in our lives. And mystics down through the ages have attested to that same teaching. And the Bible encourages us to believe in our imaginations. In the book of Mark, chapter 11, verse 24, it is said, "Therefore I say to you, whatever things you ask when you pray, believe that you receive them, and you will have them." And when you begin to exercise your imagination, when you begin to move forward because your imagination is pulling you forward, then stay the course. Don't fall back. Don't fall back into so-called reality, because then you could get stuck in the past. I mean, Lot's wife was an example of that when in the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. She was told, do not look back. But she did. And when she did, she turned into a pillar of salt. Just a note on the symbolism of that, salt was a preservative. Salt made things last. And so she preserved the past rather than moving forward into the future. On that same note, the book of Luke, chapter 9, verse 62. But Jesus said to them, no one having put his hand to the plow and looking back is fit for the kingdom of God. Do not look back. Imagination will pull you forward. Looking back keeps you stuck in the past. Then there's that powerful declaration that I love in the book of Isaiah, chapter 55, verses 10 and 11, where he says, for as the rain cometh down and the snow from heaven, and returneth not thither, but watereth the earth, to make it bring forth and bud, to give bread, to give seed to the sower, and bread to the eater. So shall my word be, that goeth forth out of my mouth. It shall not return unto me void, but it shall accomplish what I please, and it shall prosper in the thing whereto I sent it. Imagination is the power of creativity. Imagination creates our world. Not only those things that are built as a result of imagination, but our world, period. We each, every one of us, live in a different world. We may be standing next to each other or sitting next to each other, but we each live in a different world. We each perceive things differently. We may see the same buildings, but our experience of those buildings and our environment is different. That is because our brains are making it all up. I was recently watching a program on Nova where they discussed how our brain sees. What we see outside of ourselves through our eyes is not the way a camera records images on a film. No, our brain converts what our eyes see through chemical reactions and electrical impulses. And the amazing thing about the brain is that it doesn't process everything in front of us. That's too much information. According to Nova, in order to actually see the whole world, our brains would have to be 50 times bigger than they are. What is actually taking place is that our eyes are constantly moving, jumping around, taking small snapshots of the environment. And then the brain ties them all together. Fun fact, the objects that don't move, the brain ignores them because they can get painted in from memory. So if it ain't moving, the brain ain't going to pay attention to it. It's already created it in your head. What I find even more amazing than that is that what we see is based on our personality and our past experiences. We see what we expect to see. That's why there was such a controversy a couple of years ago about a dress that was either blue and black or white and gold. It all had to do with the way you perceive color. Not on what was actually there, but on the way you perceive color. Friendships were broken up over that dress because people couldn't agree on how it looked. So when you get down to it, what we see is actually based on our imagination. It said that the indigenous people who first encountered Columbus and his ships didn't see the ships until they arrived. They knew something was out there, but they couldn't see it because their brains had not yet experienced those kinds of objects, those boats, and therefore it didn't know what kind of picture to paint. So it didn't happen until the boats were actually upon them that their brains began to be able to create what Columbus's ships looked like. Up to that point, they were invisible. So when someone suggests that what we see in reality is actually a construct, maybe they're right. Maybe it's just our imagination. The physical world is not as solid and unshakable as we've come to believe. Reality is not necessarily real. So my caution is, don't let reason And so-called reality cuts you off from the fulfillment of your dreams, from the manifestation of a better life. Those materialists who like to call themselves quote-unquote realists disrespect imagination and magical thinking. They will happily tell you that what you imagine for your life is not true. They say it's impossible. They say it's magical thinking. It's just your imagination and you should settle for reality. My advice, don't do it. God feeds the images into your imagination and uses your imagination to show you possibilities beyond what you have seen, what you're seeing before you, what you are experiencing in your immediate environment. There is possibility for change. Your imagination shows that to you. So discounting your imagination is actually cutting God off. Cutting off the infinite intelligence. So rather than suppressing our imaginations, we should be seeking ways to enhance our imaginations, to develop our imaginations. I remember when I was a writer in advertising, there were times when my creative juices were not flowing because the demands were intense sometimes. They wanted 20 headlines in an hour. So what I learned that I could do was I would walk out of the office and hop on the bus. Sit in the back seat and ride the bus. And then get another one and ride the back. And by the time I got back, my mind was just flourishing with ideas, bursting. Or I would walk down to the beach and lay in the sand and look up at the clouds until the ideas started to flow. You know, Thomas Edison, who was a very imaginative person, highly creative inventor, stimulated his imagination by taking short naps during the day. He had cots all over his company. And what he would do was when he took his nap, he would hold a ball in his hand. And when he fell asleep, into a deeper sleep, he would drop the ball and would wake him up. That way he was able to keep his brain in the alpha state. It didn't go deeper than alpha. Alpha, as we know, is the most creative part of our brain cycle. That's where imagination flourishes. So use your imagination and change your world. Another fun fact, your brain only pays attention to what you decide is important. I remember that before I got interested in Teslas, I really didn't see any. But when I began to like the Tesla, all of a sudden there were Teslas all around me. There was not a significant increase in what Tesla was doing. It's just because my brain decided to pay attention to Teslas. And they were all over the place. So I say, learn to look at the positive side of our lives instead of the negative. Because that's where imagination flourishes. Science says that positive thinking is a habit that can be developed. And it will uplift your life dramatically. Science says that seeing the positive side of life actually generates chemicals that elevate your mood. Looking at things positively will make you high. Because your body will begin to generate those chemicals that will elevate your mood and stimulate your imagination. Our lives are filled with gifts, and those gifts are in every situation. I teach that every situation has a gift, no matter how bad it may seem. And if we get into the habit of looking at the positive, then we can begin to see those gifts sooner rather than later. I remember the words of James Allen from his 1903 book, As a Man Thinketh. He said, "Mine is the master power that molds and makes, and man is mine, and evermore he takes. The tool of thought in shaping what he wills brings forth 1,000 joys, 1,000 ills. He thinks in secret and it comes to pass. Environment is but his looking glass." Do not forget the words of Neville Goddard. Imagination is God.
So, the terms I used in there were imagination and magical thinking. And so the question is, what does magical thinking and imagination have to do with unforgiveness sabotaging your success? Well, it has a lot to do with it, but we'll explore that further because I have some messages I need to share with you. Be right back. Whether you're building wealth or anticipating a major financial transaction, you can benefit greatly by consulting with a personal, professional, licensed financial advisor. A personal, professional, licensed financial advisor who focuses on you, who understands your unique concerns, who relates to your special goals, who cares about your success. Afroeconomics is a strategic financial program designed for the advancement of Black wealth in America and abroad. It was created by J.B. Bryan, CEO of J.B. Bryan Financial Group, an independent registered investment advisory firm licensed in Virginia, Washington, D.C., New York, and Maryland. Being Black does not condemn you to a life of financial uncertainty. Afroeconomics can show you the way out and up. If this message has meaning and value for you, please click on the thumbs up button below. If you haven't already done so, please choose to subscribe. You can do so by clicking on the logo at the lower right-hand corner of this video. Remember, I would love to hear your thoughts, comments, and questions. Please use the chat box on the right side of the screen, or you can use the comments section below this video. The objective of this ministry is to empower you and your life. If our teaching is of value to you, then we invite your financial support. You can support this ministry by using the Cash App at $Andre Amron, or by going to our website at bozemandevelopment.com and clicking on the Please Donate link. Thank you for your support. So let's talk about the dangers of unforgiveness. The truth is that you are a vibrating spiritual being living in a vibrating spiritual universe. And your imagination feeds directly into the creative energy of infinite intelligence. And your imagination can change your world. Now understand that despite what the talking heads of major media say about magical thinking, because that's a term that's been thrown around a lot lately, and it's been a derogatory term, magical thinking. It's a term kind of dripping with ridicule. Magical thinking. What a silly thing when we know that it won't work. Well, actually, they don't know what they're talking about. They're parroting what society tells them. They're parroting what the people who sign their checks are telling them. But it ain't true. So as I said, you are a spiritual being living in a vibrating spiritual universe. Your presence matters. What you feel and think and speak and act can have a profound effect on the people around you as well as on the universe around you, the environment around you. If you are light and positive and giving off that light and positive energy, the electromagnetic field that surrounds you will reflect that, and people will be drawn to you. They will be attracted to you. On the other hand, if you are dark and negative, the people around you will feel it, and eventually they will want to get away from you because you are draining them of their energy. So that is what unforgiveness brings to us, that darkness. Now you may think it doesn't matter when you don't forgive someone, and I can understand that because that's the way we've been conditioned, that's the way we've been trained. But you see, as long as you don't forgive someone, then that dark energy is going to hide deep within you and affect you. Now you don't know it's there, but your subconscious knows it's there. So what will happen is that in surprising circumstances and situations is you will do something to sabotage yourself. You will look back later and say, why did I do that? What a stupid thing to do. But you will do something to sabotage yourself, because that dark energy is there waiting to express itself against you. Why? Because you separated yourself from it. You chose to bury it. And so it's going to get you back. Remember, I've told you that many of the commands we send out into the universe, all the commands we send out to the universe, have to go through us first. They have to go through our bodies. Whether those commands are conscious or unconscious, they have to go through us first. And so they act upon your body before they exit your body. And when they do that, if they're positive, they're going to have a positive effect on your body. But if they're negative, they're going to have a negative effect on your body. And the problem with unforgiveness is that the anger and the hurt that you feel when you are injured, when you are betrayed, that anger and hurt are not only transmitted out into the universe from your body at the time of the initial event of injury, but if you are in a state of unforgiveness which can last for years, if you're in a state of unforgiveness, then that dark energy lies there and waits for opportunities to express itself again. And if you go through the memory of that injurious event, then you're gonna emotionally go through it all over again, over and over again, over and over again. And the effect is that it is building up in your subconscious, and your subconscious gets the idea, the belief, the conviction that you are not worthy, that you do not deserve to have success, that you do not deserve to have financial independence. You don't deserve that. So if you win the lottery, you're going to end up losing all your money pretty fast. If you get a job with a great raise, then you're going to end up finding yourself back in debt again, even though you can afford not to be in debt. But you're going to put yourself in debt. Why? Because you feel guilty inwardly without your conscious knowledge. You feel guilty inwardly about having success, and so you seek to sabotage your success. You seek to get rid of it. So even though you have worked hard and long and clawed your way up the ladder for some modicum of success, inside there is a part of you that is opposed, in opposition to that. And that part of you is going to try and sabotage you every chance it gets, until you release it, until you let it go and get it out of there. You see, unforgiveness is a double-edged sword. It not only directs negative energy to the person who hurt you, who really doesn't care anymore, because they are not being affected by your anger and your blame. They're busy having their own problems. Remember, I told you that unforgiveness is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. Ain't gonna happen. But at the same time, on a longer term basis, that also directs negative energy. Unforgiveness directs negative energy to you internally. Unforgiveness of you internally, because part of you blames yourself for what happened. Yeah, that part of you thinks, I should have seen it coming, or maybe if I had done something different, it wouldn't have happened, or maybe I deserve to be treated that way, or maybe. There's a whole list of maybes that you can put upon yourself and beat yourself up because you got hurt and because this person disrespected you. And the emotions that come along with that blame game, that pity party, are guilt and shame and sadness and a sense of unworthiness. And that is a deadly combination. That is poisonous. That is poisonous to your soul. And you don't even know they're there. You don't even know they're there because you have been successful at burying them. but you haven't been successful at getting rid of them. Buried them, yeah, great, but they're still there. So those negative reactions become part of your shadow self. Remember, your shadow self is that part of you, that self that hides in the dark recesses of your mind and waits to strike back at you. Your shadow self represents your hidden qualities and desires, especially the qualities you dislike in yourself. Your shadow self is all the characteristics you usually don't show out in the open. Those characteristics that you don't like,